Welcome to another Indie Dev Showcase, highlighting the many indie games we play here on the channel. If you'd like to submit a game for a future video, please reach out. But otherwise, let's begin. We're starting off our showcase with Moons of Ardan. This is a colony sim very much in the style of like an Anno game. Please note the footage you're seeing is taken from early access and may not represent the current version of the game. Your job is to not only build one colony on an alien world, but to spread out across the galaxy, mine asteroids, and more. If you've played any kind of Anno or economic focus city builder, then Moons of Ardan should be right up your alley. You're going to be constructing various structures in order to gain resources to keep your people happy, get them happy enough, and you can kind of evolve up to the next tier, which will, of course, require more resources, more productions, and etc, etc. Once you have your base colony established, you then have the option to build rockets and travel the solar system looking for additional resources and colonies to set up, which will then, of course, allow you to expand ever further, get more resources, and all that other good stuff. From what we saw during our early access play, I do like what I'm seeing here. It did feel a little bit basic at the moment, again, when we were checking this out. This is again going for the Anno style, where once you plop a building down, that building is going to function the same way, the same time, until the end of time. If you're hoping for like an evolution of the Anno economic style city building, we really didn't see much of that here, but again, we didn't get a chance to get like far into this one, getting to kind of the space period and setting up mining colonies and so on. So if you are a fan of colony sims slash the economic kind of city building, and you haven't checked this one out yet, I would highly recommend it, as the game is still receiving updates, and I'm curious to see where this game will end up when it hits 1.0. We now switch over to The Great Below. This is an adventure, I guess, slash horror game. You are trapped and appears to be a loop inside this house. In order to solve this case and escape, you must navigate via match and map in order to figure out the clues and items necessary to break out. The concept here is kind of a quasi-roguelite. You'll go into kind of the house slash maze with a match. The match represents your timer. When it completely empties out, you are sent back to the kind of starting room slash hub, where you can use any accumulated clues or items in order to solve puzzles, which will gain access to more items, which will let you explore further and rinse and repeat. It's a very great concept for an adventure game, and I like kind of how the timing gives the adventure side more of a framing in terms of what you can and can't do. Now, the puzzle design in this one, I found it to be advanced, but again, puzzle difficulty and complexity can greatly vary between people. For me, however, I had no idea what the game was asking me to do and what the puzzles were, which unfortunately kind of stopped my adventure dead in its tracks. If you don't mind challenging puzzles and looking for a very interesting take on adventure design, then this comes with another high recommendation from me. We now go to Stuffed. This is a kind of first-person defend the area kind of game. You play a teddy bear who's trying to protect their owner from gnomes and other weird things that are trying to give their owner a nightmare. And to do that, we must use a variety of cute style weapons and set up defenses to do so. If you played a game like Killing Floor, then this should come as to no surprise in terms of the mechanics. You'll need to pick up items and resources that you can then use to set up defenses or acquire new weapons, which will allow you to better defend. As the waves go on, more rooms open up, which means more waves and enemy types will be coming to get you. When you finish a match, you'll be able to unlock additional personalization options and stuff like that. In terms of the mechanics here, this game did feel a bit bare bones. I like the aesthetic of this one, and it does feel like a more like cutesy, more cozy version of something that's, again, very graphically violent like Killing Floor. But playing this single player, there just didn't seem to be like enough going on to try and like keep things interesting. This feels definitely more like a multiplayer game. I think it goes up to 4 players total in a match. So if you like the idea of Killing Floor, looking for one that is not as bloody as that one, and you have friends along for the ride, I would give this one a check. But if you don't have that, or you're looking for a game with a little bit more meat or stuffing to it, then this may not be the best one for you. We now go to Striving for Light Survival. This is the Bullet Heaven spin-off of an action roguelike, Striving for Light. The kind of unique hook of this one is that instead of upgrading your character in a linear fashion or choosing from 1 to 3, you get a procedurally generated skill tree. The skill trees are going to be dependent on the class that you play, and as you unlock nodes on it, more nodes will show up. So there's a lot more in terms of build crafting in this one compared to some of the other Bullet Heavens that we've played. Once you've kind of figured out what weapon or strategy you want to go for, you want to maximize your perk choices to get that ball of death rolling. And then from there, just keep going until you reach the end of the arena, beat the final wave, and you unlock more content. And there's a lot of weapons, additional characters, difficulty modifiers, etc. to play. I found this one, as again, someone who's played a lot of Bullet Heavens and again, a lot of ARPGs, to be a bit on the easier side. But I do like how they were expanding on the whole skill tree and build design compared to some of the other ones that we've played. So I would say if you're a Bullet Heaven fan looking for one that gives you a lot of choice in terms of how you do your Bullet Heavening, then give this one a play. If you're not a fan of Bullet Heavens, then I don't think there's going to be anything here that's going to convince you otherwise. We now go to Loot River. The footage you're seeing is taken from 1.0 of the game. This is the Tetramino meets Dark Souls style action roguelike. You are traveling down the mysterious Loot River in order to figure out how you keep coming back to life and what is happening with the kingdom. The play here is about you manipulating the different Tetramino pieces as you float down, allowing you to set up ambushes or where you're going to initiate a fight. Combat itself felt a bit on the janky side. You see, enemies didn't really seem to have a hit stun in a lot of cases, and you're supposed to be using kind of like your parry in order to avoid or counter those attacks. But the problem is that because of the kind of isometric perspective, it's very hard to gauge the attack timings and animation tells in a game like this, and you get punished quite heavily for taking a hit. Because of that, it also means fighting lots of enemies is very annoying, as you need to be able to just like hit them all in order to kill them fast, because otherwise you're just going to get overwhelmed. It feels like the combat is trying to do too much, given the limitations of the 2D style. This is one of those games where you're either going to really fall in love with it, or the quirks of its combat are going to be too much for you to really enjoy it. I would recommend you at least give this a try and see what you think of it, but if it doesn't work for you, then you're not going to really be able to connect these pieces one way or another. And for the last game of our showcase this week, we turn to Card Detective. This is a deck-building kind of story-driven game. You play a reporter who's trying to uncover the mysteries as to why a corpse was found in a construction site. In order to solve this caper, you must use the power of cards and interrogating witnesses in order to discover the truth. How this one works is that all your cards will be based on different kinds of ways of getting information out of the people. You want to try and match symbols to the kind of alibis that are set up in order to break them and figure out what is the actual truth of what the character is doing before you run out of time. It's a very different take on the deck building style. It can be a little bit confusing at first in terms of figuring out, okay, what are my symbols actually affecting? Am I using the right card? Am I not? And I think that On Point could have done a little bit better job of explaining things once you kind of get further in. Like, the first few levels are going to be very easy. Like, whatever cards you play will typically be enough. But as it goes on, you'll need to start filling your deck with more kind of like evidence cards or interrogation cards and start actually building a strategy in order to win the later levels. If you're not a fan of deck building, this is probably not going to be the game for you. But if you do like deck building style games and looking for one that's going to be very different in terms of its approach and play, then this comes with another recommendation. And with that, we are done with another indie showcase. You'll find links to all the games down below. Let me tell you your game. Once again, for a future stream and showcase, please reach out. And with that said, thanks again for watching, and see everyone in the next video. Thanks for watching, and a special thank you to our Patreon supporters. If you enjoyed the video, do the YouTubing stuff, be sure to visit our Discord and Patreon, and if you're interested in more in my thoughts on design, check out my game design books.